Right now, somewhere in the world, a dolphin is swimming alongside a boat, calm, curious, unhurried. And if you didn't know what dolphins are capable of, you might think that's all it is, a beautiful animal going about its day. But there are people alive today who believe that animal is the only reason they didn't drown or get eaten. And the strangest part isn't that the dolphin helped. The strangest part is what researchers found when they tried to understand why. Would an animal put itself between you and danger? Not out of training, not out of instinct, shaped by thousands of years of domestication, but out of something that looks disturbingly like a choice. That's the question this video is going to sit with. And the answer, it turns out, says something remarkable not just about animals, but about what you might actually mean to one. There's a word scientists use carefully when they talk about this: altruism. The willingness to help another creature at a cost to yourself. For a long time, behaviorists argued that true altruism couldn't exist in nature. Every act of apparent generosity, they said, could be reduced to something selfish, protecting your genes, reinforcing a social bond, expecting a reward. Animals help their own kind. That made evolutionary sense. But protecting a different species entirely, a human stranger, a creature you've never met before, that didn't fit the model. And then reality kept ignoring the model. In October 2004, 4 swimmers off the coast of New Zealand had a close encounter that became one of the most documented cases of its kind. Rob Hauer, a lifeguard, was swimming with 3 others when a pod of bottlenose dolphins began herding them together, circling tightly, slapping the water with their tails. The swimmers were confused, then frightened. Then one of them spotted it. A great white shark, less than 2 meters away. The dolphins held the circle for around 40 minutes until the shark moved off. This wasn't a single impulsive act. It was sustained, coordinated, deliberate. Researchers who studied the case noted that the dolphins had no obvious reason to intervene, no shared territory to defend, no genetic stake, and yet they did. If you've ever felt that an animal was watching out for you, not just watching you, but watching out for you, this is the part where you realize you might not have been imagining it. And if that idea feels significant to you, stay with this channel, because this is exactly the kind of question we live in. Every video here is built around one thing: what is actually happening inside the mind of an animal when it looks at you? Subscribe if that question keeps you up at night, because we're just getting started. But back to the dolphins. Before you can understand why they might protect a human, you need to understand something about how they see the world and how they see us specifically. Dolphins pass the mirror self-recognition test, first designed by psychologist Gordon Gallup Jr. in 1970. That test is one of the few behavioral measures we have for self-awareness. The idea is simple. If an animal recognizes itself in a mirror, rather than treating the reflection as a stranger, it suggests a level of conscious self-representation that most animals don't show. Dolphins pass it. So do great apes, elephants, and a handful of other species. What that means, cautiously interpreted, is that these animals have some model of themselves as a distinct individual in the world. And if you have a self, you can potentially perceive another self. You can, in some functional sense, recognize that the creature in front of you is someone, not just something. Frans de Waal, the primatologist who spent decades studying empathy in animals, argued that what we see in dolphins and great apes isn't just a reflex or a trick of evolution. He documented what he called consolation behavior in chimpanzees, individuals approaching a distressed companion, not for any obvious benefit, but apparently to comfort. He believed empathy was not a uniquely human invention, but an ancient capacity, built into social mammals long before we arrived. Here's where it gets strange. If empathy in animals is real, and the evidence increasingly suggests it is, then the question isn't just whether animals can feel something for us. It's whether they can extend that feeling across the species boundary, whether we register to them as beings worth protecting rather than just objects to interact with. And there are cases that suggest we do. Not just with dolphins. In August 1996, at Brookfield Zoo in Illinois, a 3-year-old boy fell 5 meters into the gorilla enclosure. He landed unconscious. 8 gorillas were in that space. One of them, a female named Binti Yua, walked over to the child, cradled him gently, carried him to the access door, and waited for zookeepers to retrieve him. She kept the other gorillas away. The child survived. Binti Jua had a 17-month-old infant on her back the entire time. She was not trained for this. She had not been conditioned to handle humans in distress. She appeared, based on every observable measure, to have recognized a vulnerable being and responded. Now, scientists are careful here, and that care is worth respecting. Some researchers noted that Binti Jua had been hand-raised by humans and may have had an unusually close affiliation with our species. Others pointed out that maternal behavior could explain some of what she did, but neither of those explanations fully accounts for the choice to approach, cradle, and protect rather than to ignore or withdraw. Something in her recognized something in him. And whatever that recognition was, it was powerful enough to override every other option available to her. This is the question we want you to sit with right now, before we go deeper. Think of an animal you've been close to: a dog, a horse, a bird that landed near you in the garden. Was there a moment where you really felt, that it was aware of you as a person, not just a source of food or warmth? Leave that in the comments. Not because we can verify your experience scientifically, but because these stories, accumulated, start to form a pattern that even researchers pay attention to. There's a layer to this that science has only recently begun to map. It has to do with how animals read distress. In 2016, researchers at the University of Lincoln published findings showing that dogs can integrate emotional information from different senses simultaneously. They look at a human face, they hear a human voice, and they cross-reference the two to form an emotional reading. They recognize happiness, they recognize fear, and critically, fear seems to activate something in them. Studies suggest that when a dog detects genuine distress in a human, physiological stress markers in the dog rise too. They're not just observing, they're responding internally to what they perceive you're feeling. That's not metaphor. That's not wishful thinking projected onto a wagging tail. That is a measurable biological response to your emotional state. And when you combine that with what researchers have found about dogs' ability to locate and alert humans in crisis, the countless documented cases of dogs waking, sleeping families before a fire, pressing themselves against owners before seizures, guiding strangers away from danger, a picture emerges of an animal that has not just learned to live alongside humans, but has developed something that functions like vigilance on our behalf. But here's where it gets genuinely complicated. The Cambridge Declaration on Consciousness, signed in 2012 by a prominent group of neuroscientists at a conference at the University of Cambridge, stated formally that non-human animals possess the neurological substrates that generate consciousness. Mammals, birds, and even octopuses were included. What that declaration acknowledged is that the absence of a human-like neocortex does not mean the absence of conscious experience. Other neural structures can generate states that function like awareness, like feeling, like knowing. And if that's true, then when an animal turns toward you in a moment of danger, it may be doing something closer to what you would do than anyone previously dared suggest. The philosopher Thomas Nagel, in his 1974 essay, What Is It Like to Be a Bat?, argued that there is a subjective quality to experience something it is like to be each creature from the inside that science alone may never fully capture. He wasn't dismissing the question. He was pointing to its depth. There is something it is like to be a dolphin circling a frightened swimmer. There is something it is like to be a gorilla cradling a small, unconscious child. We cannot access that interiority directly, but we can observe the choices, and the choices are telling us something. And this is the part science still can't fully explain. Across species, across contexts, across encounters that involve no prior relationship and no trained behavior, animals appear to make a specific kind of choice when a human is in danger. They move toward, not away. They place themselves between the threat and the person. They wait. They stay. Why? Evolutionary models can gesture at answers. Social animals that extend coalitional thinking to trusted others might generalize that behavior to unfamiliar humans under certain conditions. Empathic resonance might trigger approach rather than flight when the distress signal is strong enough. But these are frameworks. They don't close the question. What happened next, in one particularly documented case, changed how researchers approached the entire subject. In 2007, off the coast of Tamales Bay in California, a humpback whale became entangled in hundreds of meters of crab trap lines. Commercial diver James Mosquito was part of the team that spent over an hour cutting the whale free. When the whale was finally loose, rather than fleeing immediately, it circled back. It approached each diver individually, and according to Mosquito, when it reached him, it nudged him gently, then held still, and he felt what he described as the animal acknowledging what had happened. It lasted several minutes. Researchers noted it as one of the clearest documented cases of what appeared to be gratitude behavior across species. You can argue about the interpretation, You can say the whale was disoriented, that it was drawn to movement, that applying the word gratitude to a humpback is a category error. But Mosquito was there, and he said what he felt was unmistakable. There are limits to what data captures. And that's where the loop we opened at the beginning of this video finally closes. You started here wondering whether an animal would put itself between you and danger. And the answer that emerges from the cases, from the studies, from the physiological data and the behavioral records is not a clean yes. It's something more interesting and more uncomfortable than that. It depends on the animal. It depends on the relationship. It depends on something we don't yet have a word for, a form of recognition that travels across the boundary between species and lands, somewhere that looks from the outside like loyalty, like care, like the decision that you matter. The Cambridge Declaration didn't say animals are like us. It said they have inner lives. Frans de Waal didn't say animals love us the way we love them. He said, the capacity for empathy is ancient, shared, and real. And the gorilla named Binti Jua, cradling a stranger's child with her own infant on her back, didn't explain herself. She just acted. And in that action, something was communicated that no study has fully translated, but that everyone who has seen the footage understands immediately and completely. Here is the question to carry forward. If an animal can recognize your distress, respond to it with something that functions like concern, and make a choice that costs it something, what does that make the animal to you? And more quietly, more uncomfortably, what does that make you to it? If this kind of question moves something in you, share this video with someone who has ever looked into an animal's eyes and wondered what was looking back. And if it left you with something you want to say about an animal you've known, a moment that still stays with you, leave it below. These stories matter. Hit like if this changed something in how you see the creature you live with, or the one you passed on the street today. They may be seeing you back in ways we're only beginning to understand.